I've always found that it was all too easy to fall into a bad routine. You know, feeling lazy and unproductive, that kind of stuff can do damage to your inspiration. That's why I think it's important to really arm yourself with some inspirational tools that'll help you along the way. Having a few tools can help you create what I'm calling a motivational generating routine, which can help you maintain a regular creative rhythm. It helps to keep you on track. It gives you some smaller daily goals that add up to a larger picture over time. And the concept is to give yourself small, easy steps designed to avoid procrastination and delay. These tools will give you a way to monitor your progress along the way. And if you need to make changes or kick yourself in the butt a little bit, you can do that. It also proves to you that you're actually being, in fact, productive. And you can look back and see that you've actually been making progress within a larger project or goal. You can also use your routine as an inspiring, go-to resource when the routine works, and you can see evidence of this. You'll be inspired to keep on doing it. Now, Scott Strazzante is a photojournalist. He is based in Chicago, and he works for the Chicago Tribune as a staff photographer. Scott is a really friendly and an extremely talented photographer. His work is fresh and unique, and it's a pleasure to look at. I've always wondered where he gets his inspiration, because he always seems to be out there pushing his own boundaries and coming away with great work. He's an active photo blogger for the newspaper, and the blog serves as kind of like a limitless container for his imagery. So I wanted to chat with Scott for this webinar so I could find out how he keeps himself so motivated. Okay, we are on the line here with Scott Strazzante from all the way from Chicago. Hello, Scott.
How you doing there, Grover?
Doing well, doing well. So I want to chat with you a little bit about how to create a motivation generating routine, something that I know that you've done. You've been a newspaper shooter for years and years, and I know exactly what that's like, doing that daily grind. If anything can kill inspiration and motivation and create burnout, it's newspapers. So how do you keep things fresh and exciting for yourself?
Well, when I started out, like 25 years ago, I worked at a paper where it was quantity over quality. I would have 6 to 7 assignments a day and just crank them out. And then I moved to a better, friendlier photo newspaper. And then it was, quality over quantity. And I had as much time as I wanted to work on assignments. And, that was great. And they were high quality, high content work. And so I had no issues at all. That was when I was in Joliet, the Herald News. And then I moved to the Chicago Tribune, which is, the big city paper, sink or swim, and you're on your own. There's no real big plan. There's no kind of, okay, we're going to, send this photographer off in this direction. It's kind of, you just get whatever you get. And I got really frustrated early in my days at the Tribune because I had so much free time and I didn't have anything to work on, and I kind of floundered for a while, and I spent a lot of time on the internet just kind of looking at other people's work. And then I just kind of basically said, screw it. I need to just do my own thing. And that's where I just started self-generating whatever I could find, whether it was long-term or short-term or whatever. And I think my first little, motivational tactic was I started doing photo columns. This was kind of before we really got big into the internet. So I would find little photo column ideas. I did one on behind-the-scene moments at high school sporting events, and then that kind of morphed into 3 installments of a season with different teams. And then when that went away, then I would start doing blogs based around events. I would go to the Olympics, and I would do a blog just for that 3 weeks at the Olympics, or the Super Bowl. I would do a blog for a week, and that just kept me every day having to keep coming up with content. And then I started my own personal blog, which was called Shooting from the Hip, And that for me was what I needed. It was that everyday individual deadline. I would have to create something. It could even just be something in my own home, a family vacation, stuff at work, and really it ended up, I had this mental goal of 4 to 5 posts a week. And then, we ran into a little bit of copyright issues with the Tribune where I was posting, unpublished photos, and I got a little bit nervous about that. So luckily the blog kind of moved over onto the Tribune site. Now I'm back to being able to do whatever I want. And so I think right now that is my main goal. I mean, my main motivational tool is having that blog and getting out there, every day even if I don't have an assignment, I need to find something to shoot. And I think that need has, it kind of pushes me in different directions. It gets me doing things I don't normally do. If I have a Chicago Bulls basketball game, for example, instead of just showing up and shooting the game, I might go wander around the concourse for a couple hours and do a little the United Center scene setter of just kind of odd, strange moments, because that's what I kind of like. And that, on a grander scale, I've fallen in love with street photography. And so living in Chicago and being downtown Chicago and having 4 to 5 free hours a day sometimes, I just get out on the streets and I'm just like head over heels in love with street photography. And I would say the last year and a half, that's all I want to do. And so I think, if I didn't have that blog, I would just sit around, wait for an assignment, wait for a fire, a shooting or something. But now I'm just constantly motivated, constantly shooting, and it's all, thanks to my blog.
Now, do you get something up there every day?
I'm not that prolific in creating content because I still want to have at least a certain standard of quality up there. I just don't want to throw anything up there. So it probably ends up being 3 to 4 days a week. My hopes is that 2 of them will be kind of behind the scenes moments from actual assignments. But, especially this time of year here in the gloomy Midwest where we haven't seen the sun for 2 months, it doesn't, the daily assignments just seem to be kind of low quality. So, I'm probably 3 to 4 days a week is what I'm shooting for.
Right. What I think is interesting here is that even people who are not, and this is not exclusive to newspapers, so if you're not a newspaper photographer, or if you don't want to be, or if you're, in any other form of photography, I still think this, the idea of using a blog to be a central driving force of a creative routine is a good idea. And so even though newspapers are not, I think it totally applies to any photographer. So now, if I were to ask you to come up with a top 10 list of ways to keep yourself motivated, what would be on that list?
Well, for me, the number one thing is getting out of my comfort zone. I never, just certain examples, I never use a strobe. So, I did a story on a Michael Jackson impersonator where I just totally, blew him out with a strobe every time. I just kind of try to give it a paparazzi feel, and that's something I never do. I try to do things, just to make myself uncomfortable and do things that I normally don't do, like the portrait series I did. I rarely do portraits, and so that was really good for me. And, I kind of touched on this before, but I'm always wanting to have 3 project types going at the same time. I think it's great. Everyone should have a lifelong photo project. Mine has been this story I've done on a farm that turned into a subdivision in suburban Chicago. And I started on it in 1994, and it's still continuing, and I don't think it'll ever end. And it's called Common Ground. You can find it on MediaStorm and a couple other places. And that, for me, 6, 7, 8, 10 times a year, I'll go back to the subdivision and hang out with my family there. And that's always something where if I need a little kick in the butt, I go there. And then, have something that you do that's more kind of yearly based. For me, the street photography is probably a 2-3 year thing I'll go through, and then I'll move on to something else. So, it's good to have other things that you can just stop in yearly. And then another thing is have daily things to do. I think, the story or the little essay I did on the parking spot saving chairs, that was a one-day thing. I just did it in one day, and it was done. So I think, always having, kind of these different length personal projects is always really important. study other people's work. There's so much great work on the internet, or just in books and stuff, that just keep, immersing yourself in other people's styles and just kind of, be motivated by that. Another thing I think is important, and which really, for me, working in a newspaper, it's ideal, is to take mental breaks. You can't be on all year long. You can't just be, every single day, I got to shoot. Take time, just for me, I'll take 2 weeks where I'll just do my daily assignments at the paper and not really try to go for it. And then once that's done with, then I'm, back in it at 100%. For me, I'm a contest whore. I enter a lot of contests. And, it's, part of it's to feed my, fragile ego, but a lot of it is just to have these kind of yearly reviews where at the end of the year, I look back and say, okay, this is what I've done this year. Okay, it wasn't the greatest of years. Okay, I'm going to be motivated this next year to do it, and kind of breaking it down where I just don't get, tired. And so I think for me, contests are really good, or even just sitting down once a year with an editor or a friend and going over your year's work and just saying, hey, this is what I did in 2010, and then how can I be better next year? And kind of in that same vein, find a circle of like-minded friends who have the same passion you do, and either meet up with them online, or gather in a city once a year, or hopefully it's someone in your community or at your business or someone you work with. You're constantly just talking photography. Another thing that I really failed to do for a long time, which I'm trying to do now, is to shoot my own life, shoot my family. I ran the Chicago Marathon year before last, and I photographed while I ran the marathon. And then the next year, my wife ran the marathon, so I went and I shot, with my kids there, and took pictures of my wife and things like that. So, I have to concentrate on and using that access I have in my own life, to a photographic end. And I think that might be 9 or something, but I think that's close enough.
That's great. Okay, well, thanks for your time. I really appreciate your willingness to participate in this.
Thanks so much, Grover.